Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our session today. I'm very pleased to be joined by two panelists from the industry who will be with us today to discuss the next 6 months of travel outlook for Asia Pacific from a corporate travel perspective as well as from a MICE perspective. Please allow me to introduce my panelists for today. First of all, we have Kenny Yong, founder and group CEO of Fireworks Trade Media Group. Fireworks Trade Media Group is a specialist in the Southeast Asia and South Asia, successfully running over 50 trade shows, 80 conferences, and 10 trade publications. Kenny himself is an adventurous entrepreneur with a journalist turned publisher background before moving into the trade exhibitions industry. He passionately believes that the trade exhibition industry is evolving and is needing to do things unusually, something that I can get behind very strongly. Our next panelist is James Ellis. He is the Director of Sales Asia at FCM Travel. FCM is one of the world's largest global travel management company with a 24/7 worldwide reach in almost 100 countries. The flagship business division of the ASX-listed Flight Centre Travel Group, FCM has the leverage to deliver access to the widest worldwide network of fares, hotels, and ground transport for unique and best value travel solutions. James himself has over 10 years of business development experience and expertise across the Asia Pacific region. Prior to joining FCM, James accumulated experience in the creation of bespoke travel programs with numerous multinational clients across diverse industries, including banking, investment, legal, telecommunications, and FMCG. A little bit about myself. My name is Jameson. I am the VP of Strategic Clients and Partnerships in APAC. Forward Keys is essentially a travel intelligence firm whereby we process global flight data in order to provide our customers with up-to-date, real-time demand information and trends. Okay, so let us kind of start off today's panel discussion by looking at what's happening in the region so far. Now, what we have in front of us is essentially a per-region travel performance, over summer, just this past summer between May and August 2021, compared with pre-pandemic times, so May to August 2019. Now, the dark blue line is representing Asia Pac, so no surprises over here. Most of Asia Pac is still closed, right? Effectively over this summer, our performance is minus 94% year-over-year pre-pandemic. When we look into the future as well, the business on the book in terms of actual flight tickets sold is not painting a very, very nice picture as well. We are only at approximately 8% of pre-pandemic levels. Now, some of the insights that I have been picking up from our data over the past weeks has been that in the larger scheme of things, we as a region, we are still struggling to find a way to open up. We've tried bubbles. Travel bubbles worked until they did not. A couple of examples would be, for example, the Hong Kong-Singapore travel bubble, or the Australian-New Zealand travel bubble, or the New Zealand-Cook Island bubble. They worked until they were suspended. We've also seen another type of reopening mechanism, as we affectionately know it as the sandbox, in this case, the Phuket sandbox, which is not seeing a sustained demand for the European market to travel into Phuket at the moment. So a worrying fact for me is that sustained interest, sustained demand for travel to resume as if nothing happened is not a given. Okay. Now, moving more into today's topic of understanding or wanting to understand more about corporate travel and MICE travel, I have in front of me an analysis on tax profile for Asia Pacific inbound and outbound travel for the next 6 months. On the left, we have international arrivals, and on the right, we have international departures. A few key things to highlight, and again, focusing just on business and group travel. In 2019, if we look at arrivals into the APAC region, business arrivals accounted for approximately 5.3% of total travel versus what we have today over the next 6 months of 4.9%. Group represented 12.3% arrivals in 2019 versus what we have today, pretty much half of it at 5.7% share. Right? If we look at international departures, business travel departures represented 6.5% in 2019 versus 10% this year for the next 6 months. So in fact, we are seeing more, a larger share of corporate travel over the next 6 months, understandably, right? And for group departures from APAC in 2019, group departures represented 17%, and today 5%, again, due to obvious reasons. So that's it. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and I will be going straight into the panel discussion. Okay, so Kenny, James, thank you and welcome. Enough of a monologue. Please unmute yourself and help me out a little bit over here.
Thank you for having us, Jamison. Lovely to be here.
No problem. Likewise. Just give me 1 second while my screen catches up with us. Okay. So to open up the conversation today, we've all been through the past 18 months of a new world order, if I can call it that. Just out of personal curiosity, what has got to be your most memorable, accompaniment from your work perspective, of course, like in terms of dealing with your clients during the pandemic?
Who do you want to go first, Kenny or myself?
James, please.
Okay, I'm more than happy to go because it's been an eventful 18 months to say the least, and it's still continuing on that path. Look, to be perfectly honest, Jamison, I don't think we saw the enormity of the situation when we first started to hear the noise that was coming out around the coronavirus that was appearing in mainland China, and then we saw it coming across into Hong Kong as well. It was a little bit sit back and wait at that stage, and I think we're expecting maybe like a similar to SARS or bird flu, where it gets contained quite quickly and then life goes back on as usual. Evidently, that was not the case, and things quickly took a turn for the worst. And as a business, we always pride ourselves on being quite nimble and flexible, having a flat management structure, which means that we can get things done quite quickly. And the business reacted very quickly, and we approached it and said, well, we need to be reasonable. The cash flow obviously gets impacted in a situation like this, which has knock-on effects throughout the business. So it was a case of time of restructuring. We had to look at what was possible to do and what wasn't possible to do. Unfortunately, we moved quite quickly with that. We sought investment, which came through and gave us a liquidity runway of a significant period of time. But one of the main things that we were doing is stay in contact with clients, because there was a lot of unknown from a client's perspective. And they've got travelers overseas, or they've got people at trips coming up. What do I do? Do I refund it? Can I go? All that noise was there. So it was an unusual period in time that we had probably our busiest period, but no transactions. So it was just more people coming through and asking questions. So that period, it helped shape us, and we realized that, there's not many opportunities that you get in your day-to-day business life where you can take a helicopter view of what you're doing. You analyze the good bits, analyze the bits that you want to do better, and then actually go about changing things. And the good news for us, and everything that I've seen in the last 18 months and talking to clients, is that clients see the opportunity to do that as well. They're looking at their own business and saying, we're probably not doing this as well as we potentially could be. So we want to go down this path. And usually that path ends up being technology or visibility or control. And so we've been working around that. So we've used the time to restructure. we firmly believe that we're going to come out of this a much better company. We've invested in this period as well in growing our network, our equity network through the region, and investing in technology into a key market like mainland China. So from that perspective, it was scary, but at the end of the day, I think we've definitely riding this storm as well as we possibly could. And you know what? I think the other side of everything we're going to be through will make us a much stronger company, much more dynamic company. And yeah, I think it's it's not nice taking medicine like that, but at the end of the day, it had to be done, and we're getting towards the end.
Fingers crossed, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, James. How about yourself, Kenny?
Yeah, it's interesting because although we are in both quite different industry, both James and I, but apparently the challenges are very, very similar. When it hit us, I think in 2020, back in March and April, we are a very traditional face-to-face, like type of business. Exhibitions without face-to-face, it's going to be very challenging. So when that came in, there were a lot of uncertainty among clients, lots of cancellations of booths, and honestly, our revenue dipped like quite close to 80 or 85%, which was massive. And I'm not too sure. I mean, if you speak with any trade event organizer now, they will share with you their pain in terms of losing a lot of very experienced people. I mean, our company itself, we have lost quite close to 60% of manpower, through the pandemic. And well, I mean, the good part of it is, everybody was exploring a lot of things online. So we moved some of our shows online. We did a lot of online conferences. Of course, the revenue is very much different from what we used to have, during the exhibition days. But, the silver lining in the cloud is that it keeps the community going. And there are a lot of these people, who tell you, hey, look, Kenny, I can't fly, so what are you going to do for me? So that's where we started having all these webinars going on, online conferences going on, to get the industry together. But of course, having said that, certain industries, their needs could not be met, like purely online. An example would be like the marine industry, the maritime industry, the shipbuilding industry. They are very traditional people. Somebody buying, or procuring stuff, they definitely need to see, they need to feel, they need to meet you face to face. So, but other than that, some of the other industries we managed to bring everything online, would be some of the more high-tech industries like the palm oil industry, the manufacturing industries. So we did learn some, basically, we did lots of stuff to bring everything online. And I could say that, we have managed to survive. I wouldn't even say thrive. We managed to survive the pandemic. And, right now, I guess, we could just sit back and just hope for the best. But the good news is we've been seeing a lot of inquiries coming in for exhibitions, again, face-to-face exhibitions, a surge in this past 2 weeks, in demand, because I think everybody, is getting tired and they could probably see, the light, a clearer light at the end of the tunnel. So in this part of the world, from Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, we're getting lots of inquiries. So I guess it could be good news coming very, very soon.
Yeah. And which period are they inquiring for? Are they thinking of like a end 2022 event, December this year event? Like, what are you thinking about?
Okay, even as early as June. To be fair, it really differs by country. So in June, I'm getting a lot of inquiries for the Malaysian shows. Okay, and then I also have a show in Philippines in June, but I'm not getting a lot of inquiries for that show. So it really differs, by countries.
Okay, thanks. Okay, interesting. Back to you, James. I wanted to hear from you. What are some of the general sentiment that you're getting, that you're hearing from your clients when it comes to the future of corporate travel globally? And what are your views on how that would transfer into the Asia Pacific region when it comes to corporate travel for businesses here?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been very interesting. I'll say if you spoke to us 12 months ago, we'd have a very different opinion to what we're hearing from our clients today. And I think it's because we're looking around what's happening in the world. So if we look at it on a global perspective, we've seen Europe, the domestic summer, or the European summer over there. There was traffic. There was people flying around. It wasn't usual levels, but people were getting back to travel. And we've seen that starting to fold in again into the autumn winter period with the roll on of bookings in place. The travel lanes opening up, the US, UK, all that happening is suggesting to the wider world that, hey, we're starting to get a little bit back on track here, which is really positive, and it's something that we see. Even in the Americas, you've got Mexico and Canada and the US that are opening up together. Canada to the States, but it's not reciprocal yet. But it looks like it's going to be happening in the near future, where that channel is also going to open up, which again brings a little bit of normality back and a little bit more confidence in a corporate traveler. From an APAC perspective, we've been a little bit more conservative, and I think when we look at it, it's probably tied to the fact that COVID here was handled a lot better in a number of ways than it was in Europe and North America, where it was almost out of control, and eventually it was just we have to deal with it. We're going to move on. And so the exposure to COVID was pretty much every day part of your life. Whereas in this part of the world, maybe excluding India, but this part of the world, you were a little bit contained, and that meant that a lot of governments were chasing zero COVID as a policy, and trying to reduce it down and hope that was happening around the rest of the world. Now, given that conservative nature, it's meant that we have lagged a little bit compared. But if I look at what's happening in Singapore at the moment, where the government's taken a stance on the fact that, hey, look, we have to live with this. We're an important hub for the rest of the world. We require travel to survive in a number of ways and for our economy to thrive. We can't shut our doors forever. So the vaccination travel lane between Germany and Singapore, which is now underway, we've had clients absolutely come to us and they're wanting to do that, get to Europe. Using Germany as a meeting point for other Europeans to come to them, and they can meet there and then they can fly back to Singapore. So that's given a lot of confidence in that Singapore's leading the way a little bit, and I'm sure other countries are looking on and saying, okay, well, let's see how it works there. If it works there, then we follow that approach, which is natural by nature. In Hong Kong, where I'm based, the Come to Hong Kong scheme is now looking like opening up, where mainland Chinese can come into Hong Kong, not be quarantine free. Same from Macau. So low risk provinces where you can come in and you can go into Hong Kong and take for business meetings or for whatever reason it may be. Again, that's the start of the process that it's exciting to see that taking place. If I go further down south and we look at Australia as a market that was chasing zero COVID, two of the states there are now pretty much admitted defeat in that policy, and they're now looking at the opening up to vaccinated travellers and allowing home quarantine rather than the expensive hotel quarantine, and reducing that quarantine period to 7 days. Again, that makes it more attractive for a corporate traveller who's saying, well, I've been working at my desk for the last 18 months. I can absolutely home quarantine for a week and continue to work, and it's not going to be a hassle. It's not going to be extended cost for the trip overseas. So I'm a little bit positive at the moment about APAC. I do see a lot of things that are moving in the right direction. From a behavior perspective, if we look at what our travelers have done, traditionally a good corporate travel program was you had a lot of lead up time to book a ticket. You invest in 2-3 weeks, maybe 4 or 5, whatever it was, enabled it. That's gone the other way, where we saw people say, what, it's a bit of a risk to be booking tickets so far out in advance. Things are fluid. Border control changes quickly, and we saw that in Hong Kong. I had a couple of colleagues who got caught, in Europe when they left, and it was 7 days hotel, 7 days home, and then it got changed to 21 days hotel whilst they're away. Now, that's the sort of stuff that scares travel managers, because they don't want to be putting their staff in a situation where you can go at the moment, and then they're over there and they're like, you need to get back, or when you're back, it's 21 days. So until there's that level of confidence there, I think companies are always looking to achieve minimal risk, and they won't be putting their people out in front of, in a situation like that. So it's changing. It's definitely better where we were. It's gradually getting there. As I said, I think the more travel that happens in Europe, North America, what we see what's happening in Singapore, that's going to forge the way for the rest of APAC to get on board and say, okay, look, there's a way of doing it. Yeah, let's get the vaccination rates up. Let's get controls in place. Let's get the rapid testing process, and we can get back to a new normal in a sense.
Yeah. You raised a very interesting point, which is the ever fluctuating, restriction policy. Right, whether it's 7 days or 21 days, it's a risk that the travel managers don't want to have to deal with. Are you able to share a little bit more about what are some of the other risks that these travel managers do not want to have to address. For example, I don't know, health insurance. What are the other risks apart from an average fluctuating day of quarantine?
Yeah, look, I still think there's the inherent risk of people being concerned about a market suddenly having a big outbreak of COVID. And again, to reference Singapore as an example, it was, we're now seeing record days. So if you're putting someone into that environment, even though they might be, statistically safe based on the use of a vaccine, they are still being put into a COVID hotspot, so to speak. So I think the travel managers naturally a little bit reserved by nature, not wanting to do that just yet. I think the data that's coming through on their safety and how you can manage it is still probably a bit young for their liking. So that's something that I think that they're taking into consideration. And the overall, the cost as well. At the moment, certain markets are more expensive than others. So that is consideration. I mean, hotel quarantine, even though it's quite the nuisance to have to go through it, it can be costly. It can be very, very costly. And if you're put in that situation, then that's something that I think companies would look to avoid if they can conduct it in a virtual manner.
Okay, thanks, James. How about yourself, Kenny? How do you see, from your perspective, from a MICE perspective, sentiment globally and also then regionally?
Okay. Basically, what I'm seeing now is there are certain parts are pretty. Traveling to certain areas for exhibitions, there are some exhibitors who are still pretty conservative. An example will be heading over to the South Asia market. So those days, we love to bring customers into very fresh markets like South Asia, even all the way to Nigeria, Latin America and Colombia. So they love the ASEAN. I mean, I'm talking about Malaysia, Singapore. Some of these exhibitors, they love to try new markets like this. But apparently, with the current cases, everybody became a bit less adventurous. And it's quite interesting because apparently markets that are deemed safe by them, they'll be rather prefer shows in Singapore, in Malaysia, even in Thailand. I'm getting a lot of requests, for these countries. Of course, Indonesia is still on the red list by these exhibitors, these international exhibitors. Yeah, but in terms of Singapore and Malaysia shows, yes, we could really see, everybody really getting really ready for next year, and the booking starts coming in. Of course, they have doubts. Their biggest so-called conditions to us is they're always asking us, what is your contingency plan? If the show doesn't start. So it may be similar to what they have with all the air tickets and all these things now, telling people, hey, look, what if we couldn't fly? So the quarantine, the last minute quarantine and travel restrictions could still be a major hurdle, in the recovery for the MICE industry.
And how about on the other side of the conversation? So do you find the respective MICE authorities, right, the convention bureaus, do you find them supportive of your conversations right now to plan something for next year? Or, I don't know, are they still lost, for example? I'm not saying that they are, but just,
I'm not pointing out fingers at any.
No, we're not. We're not.
Yeah, but okay, I can just say that right now, as of now, the Malaysia Tourism Board and the Thailand Tourism Board are doing a very good job. They are giving us very good support, especially the Thailand Tourism Board, TCEP. Yeah, they are getting us very well, ready for 2022, giving us a lot of support, even for the online shows that we do. Online shows don't exactly bring in tourism revenue, but they're there to support the organizers and tell them, look, you got to get a community started. We're here to support you, and you got to start planning for your show in 2022. So TCEP itself, I would say, they're pretty commendable in this aspect. Yeah, lots of support.
So I'm not so sure that I heard you correctly, but even for 2022, you are planning for in-person and also online events.
It has to be so-called during this, I believe, the next 2 to 3 years, there's this term they always say hybrid. So it's going to be like a hybrid thing where, we have online and of course we have the in-person exhibition going on. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay. Now just an open question to both James and yourself, Kenny. Sure. Could you share with the audience what are some of the new requests and you're receiving from your clients that's new during this pandemic that you've never received before? Like, what are some of the new asks?
James, please.
Okay. Look, I don't think I've ever seen such quick change in terms of priorities of what's important to companies. Now, undoubtedly, as I touched on before, this is the opportunity to change your processes. It's very hard to change something when it's in gear, and you've got people flying all around the world at any given time, and you can't just pull the plug and say, we're actually going to change this completely. So a lot of, and particularly the major companies, they saw this as an opportunity to reset the program. Look at it honestly and say, well, what could we do better? And particularly taking on an Asia focus here, some markets in Asia have been reluctant to move to a technology and embrace technology. Now, there's a multitude of reasons for that. You've got international markets. You've got some of the tools and the systems are designed for Europe and North America, so they don't tend to fit here. But this is the opportunity to change those behaviors. There's all the other things, the EAPA culture that exists in markets like Singapore and Hong Kong, where it's very much easy to give them the responsibility to make the bookings, and natural by nature is to pick up the phone rather than to do it yourself. So digitalization is probably the biggest thing. Companies come to us and they say, what we want to do is we want to change what we're doing. Okay, we know it's got some holes in it. We want to create a system where when we come back that we are moving as much as we can into an online environment to reduce that cost of service, but to also speak to a new generation of people that's coming through the business. But we've got a group of demographic that's hitting the market for employment who have grown up with a smartphone in their hands, and to not provide them with an experience that they're familiar with when it comes to the corporate world is not meeting their expectations. So they're very much looking at that as an opportunity. The other thing that we're seeing is that they want to tie up all the systems. So when we talk about HRM systems and ERPs, how can we get them linked together? We've gone for too long where they're not talking to each other. We need to get it together, and particularly in markets like China, where it's been traditionally a little bit harder to get things done. There's now a real push to get in there, and we've seen companies like Concur and the like who are moving into that market and growing their space in there. So that's been really from a technology digitalization piece. We've also seen the travel restrictions is something that they want as much knowledge as they possibly can about. I think what we see is that office hours, let's say 9 to 6, right? 9 to 6, the information is quite easily available. But if I've got someone who's sitting in Europe and I'm at home, I want them to be able to get information in real time. So that's been a real component of are there any changes to border controls, any changes to restrictions or anything the like? How do we give them that information? And obviously that means mobile. Giving them some more mobile, consumer-friendly, pushing information rather than waiting for it, and going out there. And that's something that we've invested heavily in, is how can we give information in a consumer-friendly manner as quickly as possible to clients who are on the road, and making sure that they're comfortable in the way that they're getting it. So that's been something that we've been talking about. Traveler tracking, I think it was a nice have. Prior to COVID, people were, might have ticked the box on the RFP and said they've got it, but then how often were they actively using it and actually going into it? That's now moved again, where it's like, well, we simply can't afford to not know not only where you're going, where you've been, where your next destination is, and be able to get access to that really quickly in real time. So traveler tracking is one. Quarantine hotels, companies that have definitely come to us and wanted information about that. We touched on it earlier in this discussion about people being stuck in a hotel for 21 days. It's an incredible amount of time. When those windows are shut and the door's shut and you're sitting there for 21 days, it can be a lonely old space. So people wanting to understand what can and can't be done. And if I need to get someone out of the city before that cutoff changes, let me know, because we need to move quickly. Right, yep. So that's one of the things. And then finally, and this is probably the most refreshing out of everything, is there's been a huge focus on sustainability. Every company I've spoken to in the last 12 months, one of the main questions they talk about now is the sustainability piece. Okay, I talked about resetting the program. It's like resetting that mentality of, well, do I need to fly? What's a purposeful trip? I get that you have to go here, but am I traveling with purpose or am I traveling out of habit? And so looking at that is a real dynamic. And one of the things that we've done in China is invested into proprietary OBT. And what it does is it will say if you're searching between Beijing and Shanghai for a flight, we'll also say next to it, and this is actually the cost if you were to take the trip by rail. So again, pushing people to take that more eco-friendly option where you go, oh, actually, I hadn't thought about that, but that's what we're going to do. Now, when we speak to companies, they're like, well, how can we gamify this? How can we push out to our travelers in this new systems and new setups that we want to roll out, that this is what you're doing in terms of your travel policy, which people are pretty travelers are aware of, but this is what you're doing with your emissions. Okay. And this is where you score in the company in terms of what your emissions looks like. So that's been a real change. And I think what we're going to see moving forward is that knock-on effect, because it usually starts, at the face of the TMC, it flows down the chain. And then, hotels are going to be looking at it and going, well, are we using plastic bottles in our hotels? Do we have 10 bars when probably 2 would suffice? Looking at the overall energy consumption of a particular property is going to become more and more prevalent in decision making. And I've spoken to some larger companies who said that's going to be a defining factor in the hotel program. Is when we look at our hotels and we look at the cities, well, how sustainable is that hotel? What are the emission levels of that hotel? And that's a real interesting change in the dynamic. And I think it's going to be something, if we look back at COVID and for all its horrors that it's brought us, I think if there's one thing that it's going to achieve is it's going to help us get a much more greener view on the way that travel is conducted.
That's great to hear. And it's interesting because I've been listening to quite a number of news reports over the past couple of days, and I have noticed that we have reached the tipping point, and fortunately, we have gone past it when it comes to the topic around sustainability. So I think from here on in, it's no longer going to be a vanity checkmark, but it's actually going to be a legitimate want and a need to go towards that direction. James, I do have one question for you. So going back to the start of your point, whereby one of the change that you see is, the digitalization, right? The push towards technology, making sure that you're pushing out consumer-friendly information for the new demographic of travelers coming in. The way I look at it, companies are going in this direction, using technology as a mean to improve the process, right? But are they actually rethinking the objective of travel, right? Like if, for example, in the past, instead of doing a trip with one client, are they thinking, well, maybe I can do a trip every 6 months now? Are they rethinking that purpose of travel?
I think there is. I think there's going to be a push. Look, what usually happens, the way that we see it, is the mega corporates, the big ones with the flagship travel programs that get rewarded and recognized, they usually lead the way in making these decisions, and then it trickles down to the rest of businesses as people who maybe don't have an internal travel manager and the like start to replicate ideas and replicate models. And what I think we will see is that travel, there's no denying that people need to travel. I think this environment here is never, ever going to match what it's like if we were sitting in the room and talking together. So there's always going to be that need for that. And humans, they're very, by nature, they want to get up and they want to meet new people. They want to visit new cities. I remember a study prior to COVID that was looking at what are the main things that a very desirable young employee wants when they were looking for a job. And one of the things that they want is they want to travel. And so they look at it and they want to know the company's travel policy before they accept the position. And, can I do bleisure? Can I take on a trip? Can I extend? Can I do this? And that's, you can't suddenly change that and say, well, no, now you're going to work at home in front of a screen. And that's going to work. I think there's that push to get back up, there's going to be there. But what will happen is that companies are going to be a lot more aware, as you said, Jamison, that that trip for one meeting and back in a day, let's push that one out a week and tie in a couple of other things that we need to do, and make sure that we're doing one trip for all rather than 3 trips for 3 separate things. And what's the ROI on that trip? What's the key purpose? What are we looking to achieve on it? And looking at it a lot more in depth on that space, rather than just saying, oh, you know what, we do 40 tickets from Shanghai to Hong Kong each year. But okay, well, what are we getting from that? What's the actual, what's the end of that? What do we achieve from it? And taking it to that next level. So it's I think it's going to change. I think it's going to change for the better. I think it's, companies like ours, the benefit becomes even more because, you're starting to deep dive into the analytics of what you're getting from your travel program and what you need from it. As well as I said, getting that visibility and tracking of travelers in the new COVID world.
Thanks, James. Okay, Kenny, your turn. What are some of the new requests annual service that your clients are asking for right now?
We do receive a lot of very interesting requests. In fact, during the pandemic, we are no longer an exhibition company. We became very much like a B2B technology company, so-called. We have requests from customers coming in to ask us to host their conferences for them. Being a trade exhibition company, everything is still very traditional. So irregardless, there must still be online events or conferences going on where customers are able to see their buyers even on a screen. So we receive requests like that. And back in 2020, even at the height of the pandemic in Thailand, we actually have some domestic shows going on. In fact, there were 4 domestic shows going on in 2020. I think that was September, October. So that was, it's very different from this year. So during those days, we have customers asking us, hey, Kenny, can I just take a booth there, and you send somebody there to do some remote monitoring for me, put a camera there, help me to just collect some name cards. So we get, requests like that. We also have some international visitors calling us and, hey, Kenny, can you build an avatar, an avatar, with a camera on the head moving around the exhibition, so I could see it on the camera and I want to see which exhibitor I would like to visit. So there are a lot of very strange ideas, that came to us. Of course, we didn't take them all up. I mean, the avatar one was quite costly, so we didn't take that out. But in terms of the online, we're doing a lot online, and we did a lot of the remote exhibition thing, that we're able to do back in 2020. Yep.
And which of these do you think will be a mainstay in the coming years, even after, for example, we are able to travel freely for trade shows? Do you think we're just going to go back to as we were, or do you think some of these newish features would stay?
I reckon the online conferences webinar thing would stay. In fact, I find that would be the one whereby, I mean, having said that, at the end of the day, there are still many people, even when the borders are open, you won't see everybody rushing out like a free for all. There are still some people who are very conservative, some clients who are very conservative. They would probably continue with what they were doing during the pandemic. Yeah, and there are some may also incorporate bits and pieces, like some of the webinar and having some of the in-face exhibition. So some of the webinars may be held before the exhibition, before the face-to-face exhibition, to promote, what they're going to bring over, physically, what machine they're going to bring over for a real exhibition. So these things do support, the exhibition space, that we are usually marketing.
Interesting. Basically, what you're describing right now, it's almost a mishmash of high tech, or I mean not high tech, but using technology, for example, an avatar and walking on the show, and converging that with a physical presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I think things like, in fact, I already know there are 2 companies doing it, specializing in such avatars.
And are they at a mature enough phase to scale this up, or is it kind of still like finding our way around and trying to get sexier? I
think it helps that they are a US company. So apparently, I think the Western countries, they are a bit more, it's easier for them to adopt technology like this, sure, and get adaptive. But in this region, I guess like the countries I'm dealing with, they are a bit more, conservative. Yeah, so it may or may not work here, but I do see it growing very well, in the other side of the world, in the Western countries.
So I guess it might not be that we would move into a high tech next gen phase in the next 5 years in APAC, but most certainly the evolution has started in the West and probably in the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah, and I believe that it will be a mix. It will not be a purely tech based type of thing going on. There will always be this element of face to face, irregardless.
Okay, interesting. Thanks for that. Look, I've got no further questions. I don't know whether Kenny or James, you guys want to throw out a question or a comment. Anything from you guys?
Let's see. Jameson and James, both of you, you are very into the travel industry. You guys crunch numbers, data. Like this is not a crystal ball thing. It's more like a, what in when in your opinion, do you think in this part of the world, I'm talking about, I'm not going to go so big as to Asia Pacific. I'm looking at Southeast Asia. Like, when do you think the doors will really fly open, and hey guys, it's time to travel, like this is just, it's a very abrupt question, but I think, nothing too serious about it, but
for me, 2023 at least.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. James?
Look, I think it's very much attached to quality rapid testing. As soon as we can nail down quality rapid testing that is 100% reliable, 99.9% reliable, you will see that the market will feel a lot more comfortable with people moving around. And I think that that's probably where the investment needs to go, is just to make sure that we've got the ability at an airport to test people comfortably. Who knows how far, maybe 30 minutes, you've got the results and you can board your plane and move on. Now that would make it a lot more seamless, because if it is getting to the situation, I mean, if you look at the airports now and you look at Singapore airport, despite there's traffic going out of there, the airport itself is empty. But if you start opening up to all these different countries and markets around the world, you're going to have a lot more travelers there. And when there's a lot more travelers there, that creates a lot more confusion, and the processes that, the new processes are going to take time. And so that whole airport experience in itself is something that we haven't really encountered yet in Asia, what a full airport's going to be like when we get back here. So that, I think that's going to have an impact. Look, I'm hopeful it's not the end of 2023. I do see why you would think that, Jamison. I'm hoping it's sooner. Vaccination rates are going up, which is, giving a lot of confidence to me that we'll move in that right direction. As I say, I think Singapore has been a real trailblazer in what they're doing, and if its work shows that it can be effective and can be safe, then I assume other markets like Malaysia, particularly who's been through something similar when it comes to high levels of COVID exposure, they might be keen to do something as well in that market. So you've also got those markets that survive very heavily on tourism, and you can't keep the doors locked for too long. Yeah. So fingers crossed it's on its way to recovery. But yeah, that's the way I see it.
Yeah. I agree, James. I do believe that we will start on the path to recovery, as soon as Q4, Q1 this year, right? But I think it's going to take a while until we get back to a level of volume that we are somewhat used to in the past. That's going to take some time. Okay, thank you both. Really appreciate your time today to have a chat with us. Thank you to TTG Media for putting this together. I hope the audience will enjoy our conversation today. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Jameson.
Thank you, Jameson. Thank you, James.
Kenny.